my favorite thing to say is, we weren't put on Earth to transfer data from Excel to a database. That's really not the human's core strength. And yet so much of our jobs, in some capacity or another, has this element because of how software has been built over the last 30, 50 years. And we have a chance to change that efficiency and productivity. And it's exciting. It's new. I mean, we don't even know the names of the jobs that will exist in 10 years from now, just because the innovation of products and services that will come out of this revolution will be so extraordinary. And all those will need jobs. So hang in there, keep upskilling, keep learning, just like every one of us has to. But I think the promise of AI is significant.
I want to make sure I'm pronouncing your name correct. Neeti?
Neeti? Nice.
Neeti, okay. Can you give us your spiel? Who are you? And maybe just tell us about sort of like the short version of your origin story for Automation Anywhere.
All right. So Automation Anywhere, as we said, we started in 2003. And Mihir, who's our CEO, we were thinking about it, and he was a big proponent of, look, there's so much work being done with software, and we both were in the tech field, of course, and but there's so many inefficiencies, and it was very glaringly obvious to us that there's a lot of busy work being done. So if you take that moment in time, software had been around, computers had been around for whatever 30 plus years, and we had created all these siloed applications, and that really had enabled us to do a lot more than we did before. But it needed kind of a reset to rethink and re-architecture how to get that productivity and efficiency to that next level. And the mission of the company right from the get-go was, how can we enable humans to do more and fuel the future of work? You use those exact same words. And that mission hasn't changed in 23 years. So our roots are from that point of, we created that early category of robotic process automation at that point, which also had intelligence built in. And then about 10 years ago, we started the mainstream AI applications within the platform, and come 2025, at this point in time, it's a very mature, stable product that services obviously very many mission critical operations across many industries and verticals. So the reason I bring that up is it can be relied upon at any level really at this stage. So it's just a fantastic time for Automation Anywhere, from where it's come to where it is. And we're very super proud of, what the technology has done and it continues to do.
Robotic process automation, RPA, I think it's actually important for people who are, I think, beginning the learning journey around AI, and their starting point is large language models, to understand that, depending on your definition of artificial intelligence, like, we've had a lot of the capabilities that I think folks assume, just became available thanks to LLMs. But maybe do you have an example that you could share to help someone understand what RPA looks like? You don't have to give the actual name, but maybe just like an example of a type of company you might work with, and how they're what are they automating essentially?
Absolutely. So maybe this is a good example because it tells you what is possible today, right? So RPA just gets the work done. And that was, for us, generation 1 of our platform, and we're at about generation 3. Let me kind of lay out an example that kind of shows you the breadth and width of what is possible. So let's say you are a company, one of millions in any industry or vertical, and you have to onboard a vendor. Something as simple as that, right? And it's complex because normally there's just a lot of different steps that you have to do to onboard a vendor. Any company has this process. Now, ideally speaking, what we would do today, and what the Agentic platform that we have today will do, is you just come up to the agent and you say, I need to onboard a vendor. I could be sitting in marketing or HR or in procurement, it doesn't matter. And the agent would kind of figure out, one, what are the processes within your organization? So it's already been trained using LLMs, using other things, as to what this company requires for a vendor to be onboarded, understands and is already trained on compliance and governance around based on where you are or the governmental regulations and so forth, what is needed. And then the pitfalls or things that we have basically trained the agent to look for. And just by the person coming up, the human coming up and saying, look, I need to onboard a vendor, in less than a minute, that vendor, barring any complications that they have not submitted something, should be onboarded. Currently, that takes anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks. Now, if you look at that whole process being done in less than a minute, there are LLMs involved, there's natural language processing involved, there's RPA involved, because what our platform is able to do is not just spew out these are the steps that you need to do to onboard this vendor, but it actually does that work. So it actually will go into multiple systems and do what it needs to do in order to onboard that vendor. And that's actually getting the work done. So, if you look at what agentic process automation can do today, there are components of it from all these different aspects that come together and really is at that crucial point of changing how we do work, not just talking about it or getting information about it or learning more about it, but all of it and then actually getting it done.
I think folks are coming around to this question of like, okay, we actually need to understand like what does the future of work look like? And they're hearing a lot of, I think, rhetoric around like, AI and technology is going to be replacing a lot of jobs. A lot of like when I think about onboarding a vendor, I couldn't imagine maybe a more boring aspect of somebody's job. Like, I don't think there is anybody that is going to shed a single tear for, not having to go through you said 2 to 4 weeks of time involved. It's like a lot of documentation. And what would you say to a parent who's asked this question of like, how do I guide my student? How do I guide my kid? Should they still go to college? Like, are there careers that are going to disappear because of these technologies?
That's a really great question. And there are many aspects to it. I'll mention a couple of them. One is history has taught us that no industrial revolution is without the pain of transition. So if you look at whether it's the first or second or third industrial revolutions, and right now we're in the technological AI revolution, transition is hard. And so I understand the pain of, okay, what is happening? How do I navigate this and what's going on? But understand that it is short term because we are right in the crux of it, in the middle of it. And that transition has always been hard. But what history has also taught us is any one of these revolutions has really unleashed a series of innovation and productivity for the globe at large, right? So any region of the world, any vertical, any industry has really been better off or has come with more ideas and more products and services and so forth. So those jobs will be created. Yes, but we are in that transition of moving from one type of job to another type of job, and some jobs are more impacted than others. But I think it's temporary. I think it's within the next 2 or 3 years, we will see that transition happen because some jobs are already absorbed by the AI, of course, but some jobs are getting morphed by the AI. So like I said about vendor onboarding, if you're in a procurement team, for example, and you're not doing vendor onboarding, hopefully you're doing something else and making your internal customers' life easier, right? Look at healthcare. I mean, we have doctors and nurses who spend so much of their time, in fact, a majority of their time, on administrative tasks. And I don't know a single patient who wouldn't want the doctor to spend an extra 10 minutes, even hand holding or having that emotional connect if you're going through some health issue. And that's important. I think if the end goal of what technology can bring you and bring society at large is important enough, then it's worth that transition cost, if I may. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of what you asked about is, I don't think knowledge is ever wasted, and that might be coming from a view of a parent, maybe. But when you go to university and you study and you put together the skill sets that you might have, and yes, we are again in that transitionary time, so you have to have continuous learning. You have to continuously upskill because the industry is moving faster than the speed of light at this point. So yes, there is that transitionary learning that's also needed. But when you put all of that together, it makes the human again come at any problem with a level of innovation, skill set, and tools that they never had before. So if you take a chance, or I mean, take a list of the biggest problems facing the world today, and there are so many, but take everything from capacity planning or climate change or the productivity crisis. How are we going to increase GDP in most countries when the population is decreasing? And one of the ways is when you increase the productivity of each individual person. And these technological tools will allow us to do so. So, by and large, I think transition is hard. We're in the midst of transition, so it feels a little bit more in your face. But I think with the level of upskilling and the workforce development that we're seeing come through, I think we'll deal with it better than we have in the past. My favorite thing to say is, we weren't put on Earth to transfer data from Excel to a database. That's really not the human's core strength. And yet, so much of our jobs, in some capacity or another, has this element because of how software has been built over the last 30, 50 years. And we have a chance to change that efficiency and productivity. And it's exciting. It's new. I mean, we don't even know the names of the jobs that will exist in 10 years from now, just because the innovation of products and services that will come out of this revolution will be so extraordinary. And all those will need jobs. So hang in there, keep upskilling, keep learning, just like every one of us has to. But I think the promise of AI is significant.
Yeah, uncertainty can be really scary. It's worth saying that uncertainty also brings opportunity. And frankly, the more I dig into it, the more I feel like, students today are probably in a much better position than even like a lot of folks who are in the middle of their careers. Because, these kids are AI native. They just, and the example I give is like, imagine trying to teach your parent how to like create an Instagram story. And then it usually clicks for kids because they're like, oh yeah, they could never figure that out. And yet here you are sort of like throwing together all these like I also struggle with Instagram stories. But when you co-founded Automation Anywhere, this is 2003. This is like, so computers had roughly proliferated. The internet was in sort of like the still middle stage of maturing. Fiber had been, I guess at this point, overbuilt. But there was like broadband was becoming more and more accessible. We didn't have, I think, any social media companies. I'm trying to think when MySpace was. Maybe MySpace in 2003?
Not sure. It was
7. So
yeah.
As you think back to what sort of equipped you to navigate, what at the time was also a lot of change and disruption, but ended up being, in retrospect, tremendous opportunity. Yeah, like what equipped you to navigate that? And what, even to get into a place where you were able to have that conversation with somebody about starting a company?
That's an interesting question. But I think just like all innovation, it comes from trying to understand what problem you're trying to solve, and then you just go after that problem. So if the problem in our case was how do we enable humans to work more effectively, and really fuel that productivity gain that will come from that, how do we make them do more knowledge-based work versus manual work, and really look upon it as a way of working, a way of getting work done, then you find many ways to tackle that problem. And one of the ways that we focused on was, okay, how do we create that level of intelligence, so that the boring, manual, repetitive work, of course, gets done. And that was the advent of the RPA. And then, of course, bringing more intelligence and artificial intelligence into it so that we can take it to the next level of a really increasing productivity at an X factor. Looking at that problem consistently, constantly, and continuously, and learning all the different mediums that we can bring into that problem to solve it, and make it most absorbable for the market, for the industry, I think is what fueled us. I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. And because I think what you're describing is, it's really sort of at the heart of Silicon Valley and really advice that like all these startup founders are getting. And I think that there's a lot of folks who assume that, being involved in technology means you're a STEM person, means that you're a hardcore engineer. I think what really drew me to you was, this focus that you have on social impact, which is I think there's obviously a technology component to it, but it's also really bringing in the humanities and these questions of ethics. And so I'm curious, like, if you, like, do you buy that this sort of like, as we move into sort of the next phase, like, so the next technology revolution, that you don't have to be a STEM kid necessarily to be able to identify those problems, to be able to think about solutions and sort of like have a role in sort of shaping the future?
Yes and no. I think you can be anything you want to be in this world. I tell my children that, and I truly believe it. So I think you may or may not be in STEM, but what you need to be is somebody who looks at something and is able to solve for it. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it, and I am a techie at heart, I guess, and I feel like it is a language. It is like English or French or something, where if you understand code, even if it is in a very basic way, it enables you to understand how to solve for certain things. So it's a mechanism that teaches you how to find solutions and look at a problem in different lights. So I would encourage everybody, even if it's not native to you, just to get a dabble in it, even if you can, And then, of course, if you take to it, and I think, as you put it, this generation is born AI native, so they are very, very clear on how to deal with technology, and so coding might help or might not help them. But I think that's important for me. But career wise, look, I'm not an engineer, but I do know how to code. I learned to code when I was in high school, and I continued coding for HTML and other things from a marketing aspect, which is what my career was in. But it enabled me again to look at problems from different solutions and how to structure them, how to framework it, how to deliver it. And I think it has made me a better marketer for that. And then now moving into impact, I see, we work with nonprofits, and we have a huge arm of reskilling that we do. And what I see is that when people are equipped with platforms like ours, they are able to do more as a nonprofit, or they are able to get skilled, even if they've never. I'll give you an example for reskilling. We work with refugees, and we have this one organization we work with who brings refugees out of Afghanistan. And, the way it works is they land in whichever country, obviously, that takes them in, and they land in Japan. Now, if you're an Afghani national in Japan, and you can hardly speak Japanese, so you can't work in the gig economy, you can't get a job at Starbucks, but you can talk code. So if you know a little bit of technology, and that's what we've done, we've worked with these refugees through these social organizations to help them upskill on our platform for about 3 months, and they're able to land a job even living in Japan, knowing Afghani. And so it's to me it's something that brings people together as well, and allows for collaboration and engagement at another level. So if you can, I think you must learn to code, even if it's at the basic level. Understand STEM in that sense, and I'm using STEM very broadly here. But it enables you to do more. So curiosity for that is important.
And I find this fascinating because there's been a lot of rhetoric around, well, because large language models are really good at coding or writing code, that's I think there are some who are asking the question, well, do kids even need to learn computer science anymore? And my intuition is actually that we're going to see a lot more examples like the one you shared, where, whether you're hiring a marketer or a customer success manager or, a salesperson, I think having the computational thinking skills, the computational literacy, also the problem solving that you build, that like the coding is just a bunch of problem solving and iteration, like sort of like constantly. There's all these like durable skills in addition to the computational thinking that you build in CS, that it's not that you can't in some way get that, but it's just if you have the opportunity in front of you, it's just a very powerful way to build that. But that's like actually a bit of a contrarian take. And I'm like, because there's a lot of other CEOs of tech companies that are saying, yeah, I wouldn't tell my daughter to bother learning computer science. And I feel oppositional to that. And it's refreshing to hear that from you. I'm curious, like, have you seen it, at your company? I mean, have you seen the value of coding decrease? Maybe like that might be one thing that we might, if this is playing out the way some are claiming, are you starting to hire people that just have vibe coding experience without actually knowing CS?
Again, yes or no. So yes, absolutely. We are seeing a lot of coding being auto-generated, even at Automation Anywhere, enabled elsewhere, right? But to your point, let's look at a coding degree over the last 10 years, for example. Even that instructional, educational curriculum is going to have to morph and change. So what you typically learned in a computer science course or a coding diploma might change a little bit. It might be the basics of coding and how to use these tools more effectively, and then add a layer of strategic frameworking or prompt engineering or whatever else it may be to get it right. But it's a little bit like, in my opinion, like math or art. Math, art, literature, philosophy, coding, or STEM in some form or fashion. I think are all essential human skills that enable us to do better and understand the world around us better, and then produce better work product. And so, having some element of it is important. Whether it is at the exact same way it has been over the last 10 years, I think probably not. I think it's going to morph and change. And we're seeing universities and vocational training and continuous training change to deal with that. Um, so the answer is yes and no. A traditional computer science coding degree from 10 years ago might not look the same tomorrow. It will look a little bit different.
Yeah, it was Philip Colligan at the Raspberry Pi Foundation, and I had this conversation actually, like it was like 2 years ago. And I was asking him basically the same question. And he was like, well, Alex, we had, GitHub, and there were a lot of, and Stack Overflow. And there's been like all these sort of advances that have made it significantly easier to code. A lot of coding was, it may not have been automated by AI, but a lot of it was sort of automated by, just like, developer operations and other process improvements. And all of those corresponded with an increase in the value of computer science, not a decrease.
Correct. And it also increases what is possible. Because, if you were to do it the traditional way, I mean, I look at math, right? Like, I mean, if you didn't have the calculator, for example, and you had to do everything by hand, you'll still do it, but you'll take that much longer to do it. And the fact that you have a calculator and now a computer and now something else just enables you to do that much, much faster. And that allows you to actually innovate even more. Maybe there's that much more research in space because of that, and there's that much more research in biotech and healthcare because of that. So it is about evolution of any of the STEM disciplines and the tools available to every human to get to the next level in that discipline.
You also you said something that was important. You mentioned CS alongside math and literature and sort of these other subjects that I think consider to be sort of like fundamental to learning. Certainly when I was in school, computer science felt a lot more like a vocational track. Like you go into CS to get a job at a tech company.
Yeah.
And you said something that really stood out to me, which is like CS is a way of understanding the world around you, which, it's like everybody learns physics in school. And, I don't know that I use physics every day, but it is sort of, I think like math, it's one of those things where there's sort of intrinsic value in understanding the world, to say nothing of the actual other skills that you develop in the process. Like how often do you sort of like run into challenges with people, even like being aware of, some of the, both like the possibilities of technology or maybe the challenges that it poses? Because like my sense is that we're really not quite, I think most people don't actually understand what's sort of happening. They kind of like they have these magical tools that they use. But I'm just, from your vantage point, I'm just curious.
No, absolutely. I think you're right. I think like we live obviously in Silicon Valley, and so we see the world with tech glasses, if that makes sense, right? And we see everything and understand the technologies behind certain thing, or how complex something might be, or how uncomplex it might be, or simple it might be. I think the more products and services utilize these new technologies. So I'll give you an example. If you're a farmer, let's say in rural India, and you're utilizing AI to figure out automatically what the water requirement of your field is, and it's on a day-to-day basis using satellite imagery as well as soil sampling and 100 other things which you couldn't do before. So you would understand the value it provides. You understand that the science behind it. You may not understand the full science behind it. You may just look at it upon a tool that delivered for you. But you have to engage with that tool. You have to engage with that science, and you have to understand and be part of that ecosystem. So the more products and services that you utilize, and I think we already do, right, from healthcare, biotech, pharma, logistics, governments. I mean, across the board, all these services now utilize tech in some form or fashion. So whether you are an end recipient of that and you understand that there's something behind it, and that might be the most rudimentary way, and then or you're a scientist or you're a technologist in Silicon Valley and you understand it fully and wholesomely, I think there's always a range. But I think the world is understanding that digital and technology is an integral part of a lot of things we do now. I mean, look at the mobile phone and what it did. Um, and if you look at there's an example always from Africa that says they never went through the ATM revolution because their banking went leapfrogged and went straight into mobile technology, but they understand that there's tech involved there, and they understand that the value of that tech that they bring. So to some extent, I think they understand it. They may not comprehend it fully, but I think people by and large understand that there's value to be had from this.
Yeah, and like on that thread, there's, as I've been thinking about sort of like how to talk about the future of work and the future of let's say tech jobs. One thing that I've heard people raise is this the Jevons paradox, this idea that like as the cost of certain commodities comes down, you actually see an increase in demand, and that was the case for like vehicle fuel efficiency standards. We consume more gas as fuel efficiency went up, because it was more people could then drive, and you could drive further. And I think about small businesses, which like right now, and we're a small business, the cost of having an engineering team is like astronomical. Like you need a front end and a back end developer and a system architect. If in the future we could have engineering capabilities with, let's say, 1 or 2 people on staff instead of like 5 or 6, or I don't even know how many dozens or maybe even hundreds that your company employs. I bet there's a huge long tail of businesses that actually could do a lot with an engineering team that had, that was sort of augmented by AI. Are you seeing a bit like, are there any sort of signals that you might be seeing just from Automation Anywhere's work, like businesses that maybe people wouldn't expect to be technology forward that are able to kind of use these tools?
Absolutely. I mean, I work in the impact side, on the impact side, and obviously with a lot of nonprofits. And, I feel nonprofits, the requirements that have come to nonprofits over the last 10 years has just been phenomenal. So whether it's from a capacity perspective or the speed of delivery, for example, if you're the Red Cross and there's just that many more natural disasters, there's that many more wars, there's that many more people that you have to serve very instantly, or etc., right? So the demand, healthcare, I mean, you just name any nonprofit, from education, right? The capacity requirement has just doubled, tripled, quadrupled in very short periods of time. And so when they embrace technology, and there's a light bulb moment when they realize how it can help them do more, because they're so mission driven, obviously, and they want to kind of accomplish more towards their mission. So I'll give you one example. We work with a nonprofit in India called Akshay Patra, and they provide food meals, the lunch meal for about 2.4 million children every day. And they run 70 kitchens around the world, etc., etc. Now, their requirement is that within 5 years, they've got to hit 5 million children. And so now, how do you build that? You can't just throw money at a problem and make it happen, because there's just so much other things going on. Not to mention capital is hard to get as well for nonprofits, and grants are hard to get. But we work with them in order to increase the efficiency and productivity of that, of their entire operations right now. And we're hoping to kind of help them to get there, because we can get faster productivity. So whether it's grant management, vendor management, fleet management, supply chain, there's just so many things that they have to do that we can directly impact the bottom line of a nonprofit. And so we're seeing, and once you have somebody in their leadership who understands, of course, this has a vision behind it, and then they see the value or the ROI that a tech company like ours can deliver to their operations, then they immediately obviously become believers, but they have a plan of action. Okay, we can utilize this in order to get where we want to go. And that's significant. Another example I'd like to give you would be, a smaller nonprofit that we work with. They're an aid agency, Step with Hope. They basically set up these aid tents in war areas, or where IDPs or refugees can come up and basically request diabetes medication or whatever. And we helped automate the intake process, and they were able to deliver 400% more aid at any given time than they could before. Fantastic opportunity. But that was not the cool part. The cool part was the humans on the ground who were not tech native, the volunteers on the ground, realized that, okay, now that we've automated this process, we're able to get the results obviously very immediately, and we're touching 3 systems. So why are we not flagging for trafficking victims when they walk in through the door? So if I walk in through the door with a 10-year-old child and ask for aid, have I actually filed a tax return with that child? Et cetera, right? So now again, not tech native, understands the value that is being given, and is able to innovate and deliver so much more to humanity and society because of how they think and innovate around it, right? So I think we're seeing across the board a lot of organizations, and of course the corporate side is well documented. But I'll give you one more example from the corporate side, which I found very interesting. We have a large energy company that's a customer, and their tax department decided to, create an LLM, an agent and they fed it the entire tax code of Brazil. It happens to be in Brazil, and then had a human at the helm, basically take care of ambiguities and things like this. And then it fed the agent the tax filing that they had for the year. And then the agent was able to spew out basically areas to relook at and find and decide. And they were able to serve $120 million in savings in 3 weeks end to end. Again, cool part is that $120 million that energy company saved hopefully will go into clean energy R&D, because that money otherwise would not exist for that program. So again, just fantastic use cases of, again, I call it human innovation, of how to use these technologies to get to that next level. And yes, we see it across the board, small businesses, large businesses. We have one all-volunteer organization in New Jersey, Jersey STEMs. They run a science STEM program for after school for kids in New Jersey. And they automated quite a few of their processes. And given its volunteer run, those volunteers were then able to do a lot more than they could before, of course, run more programs in more schools. Not to mention, when a volunteer joins, again, they're not joined to transfer data between Excel and the database, right? They want to kind of do the more touchy-feely and emotionally high work that is involved. Fantastic, and so many use cases. And this is just with our technology. So imagine all the other technologies and innovations that are coming out, and what can be done. It's an amazing time.
It's funny because you don't hear about these stories as much. I think we hear a lot about, companies that are replacing people with AI. And even that, there's a lot of fuzziness to the data, right? In terms of like how much of that was actually like people being replaced versus just sort of cyclical layoffs. And I think we hear about, the frontiers of science. So the idea of AI maybe helping cure cancer, things like AlphaFold. Like what you're describing is, in some ways, some of the more boring stuff that happens in the background. And yet, when you're talking about a 400% increase in, like scale and impact for nonprofit, I mean, most of the time, achieving a 400% increase corresponds with raising 400% more money. I mean, like it's really hard to grow like that. And are there any sort of common threads as you think about some of these different organizations that you support that sort of are sort of like strong, maybe leading indicators of their ability to like harness the technology really effectively? I mean, does this come down to like different individuals within organizations, or sort of innovation culture or cultures of innovation?
Absolutely. I mean, there are many things, and many things put together can make great success or great failure, right? So absolutely, I think we call them champions within organizations who want to kind of embrace a new technology or understand it and see how it can be applied. Definitely, that helps. I think what also helps is when a customer um, doesn't necessarily go after. See, when you're trying something new, you don't want to go after the most complex problem because your teams are not ready to tackle it. So if you go with a good starting point, a leveler in a way, then you have a better chance of success. So you get quick early wins so that the team one understands what's involved, believes in it, has then things fall in place. There's this collaboration and computation within the organization that has to happen, and then you can tackle a really large problem. So sometimes we see that make a difference as well. Then yes, absolutely, there's internal change management that's required. So in many cases, if it's a very large organization and people are worried because of the job losses that are coming or something like that, and some of it might be true as you said, and some of it might actually be just being attributed to AI, but it's something else within the organization. So definitely some level of change management. And I find that organizations that do a lot of training for their employees on new tools and new software and make them comfortable with trying them out have better success of it. Um, so all of the above, in a way, can lead to success. In a nonprofit's case, it's a little bit, I would say, nonprofit and healthcare. They're both areas where we see that the mission is so strong within the organizations to obviously provide service in some form or fashion. That as long as they know that this is going to enable them to achieve their mission better, faster, easier, then they are believers. Sometimes not tech native, so there's a little bit more handholding or more training that's required, but they also have the biggest ROIs.
Are there any examples of nonprofits that you think we need to be doing a better job, sort of like bringing them into this sort of like spirit of innovation? Like maybe there's like untapped opportunities for social impact, and perhaps even that the latest advances in sort of AI technology, might have enabled that were possible, 5 years ago.
I mean, all of them, if you ask me. But that's my tech hat talking. When I wear my impact officer hat, I feel for them because these are fantastic people who so clearly believe in the mission. Anything is a distraction if it's not mission driven. So to some extent, to pause what you're doing to get your tech stack ready or work on the back office integration or work on application API or whatever else it may be is hard, and I understand that. It's not easy, and I'm glad they do it the way they do it because they serve us better by doing it, serve society better by doing it. But having somebody in the organization who um, who is tech driven is important in these cases because again, from our vantage point, we feel the ROI is, I mean, we're talking 2-3 months of ROI, not even a year, 2 years, or 5 years, which was traditional, right, for a lot of software development to provide ROI. If you had to hire an engineer and have him code something for you, and then that by the time it actually gets to market for that nonprofit, it used to be a 2-year time frame. Now it's 2 months, 3 months. So I think talking to them more, enabling them more, having volunteers who understand tech contribute to them more. Many ways that it can be achieved.
No, that makes sense. Are there any, you mentioned one use case in education. I was curious if there was any others. We work with a lot of peer nonprofits, but also a lot of schools. And this question of like, what are the ways that, AI can support learners is coming up more and more. This is a STEM program in New Jersey, I think you had brought up.
Correct. We work with so many academic institutions. So, like in the US, we work with the University of Florida, we have UMich, we have Carnegie Mellon, we have about 160 universities worldwide. For example, in Australia, we're working with RMIT and University of Melbourne. With RMIT, they had a goal of improving student experience. That was their goal. And what are the things we can automate so that students have a better experience? And I don't have all the use cases at the tip of my fingers, but there's a case study on our website that talks about it. And it's about that and how they are improving student experiences by making sure they're responsive, they're quick to deliver whatever they have to deliver to the students. Financial planning, and if you're dispersing scholarships, how do you get that faster, better, without errors? These are all things that make or break a university's operations, and we're part of it. And there's just a plethora of institutes that utilize automation and AI in the regular operations, even in the intake process, and so forth.
Yeah, I think a lot about, schools are, especially in K-12, they're always struggling with, how to engage stakeholders, especially parents. They're also struggling with student engagement, and just, a worrying number of students are not showing up to school, and it's kind of across the board. It's, it used to be that like underperforming students used to do that, and now there's even good students are just like, I don't see the value. I think schools often have traditional mediums, like channels to communicate, like you have a newsletter, maybe a bulletin board, literally. And what you're describing is, I think, much more like responsive in like sort of like real-time systems that can, especially with, like, I'm thinking about like parent back and forth. I think a lot of teachers' time is spent just responding to parents. What advice would you have for a leader of a nonprofit, a school, if they're thinking about, okay, how do I want to get myself set up so that we can be one of those exemplars that, whether it's Automation Anywhere or sort of like any technology provider that can come in? You mentioned having an internal champion. You mentioned training. Is there anything else? And maybe it's that simple, but is there anything else that you would share? And I say this as myself, someone who's, trying to figure out the answer to that question.
There's no two institutes that are alike, only because there's just so much of differences in the way they operate or their culture, and how they're funded and other things, of course. But again, I think if the end goal, it's just like any other institution or organization, if the end goal is very clear, like let's say you're saying, I want to increase student experience, speed of delivery by 10%. Then that goal setting is super important, because I think that it allows you to go in one direction versus doing 100 things and not seeing the benefit come through. So I think that's important. So strategizing around it is super important. I think the ROI will speak to itself very quickly. At least in our platform, we see that the aha moment come very quickly once they start the journey, because you're like, oh, if I could do this, I could do 5 more things, and I could do 10 more things. And they never want to go back to the old way of doing it, because they see the value, of course, but they become more human-like, in my opinion, when they stop doing things that AI can do, which is interesting and beneficial. I'm trying to think, bringing it into the curriculum is important, I think, also, because again, like for Automation Anywhere, for example, we use our own product and we call ourselves Customer Zero, and we document what we've learned and the ROI we're seeing and how it portrays and so forth. So when you self-learn, I think you bring out a better product or solution. And so if any institute also is learning themselves, training their students or training their professors on it, then that also comes back into that ecosystem, So many things that you can do there. And the larger the organization, obviously, the more processes and more compliance and governance and more everything, which can be done well.
Yeah, I like this idea of starting small and picking something where you can, and what you said is important about this, like seeing the ROI in just a few months, because what you need is, even if you have your champion, you want to be able to win over the rest of the organization, and it's you want to point them to something measurable and tangible. I think part of the challenge with large language models is they're so multifaceted and multimodal, and I think there's a sense of, and also I think very high expectations that were set. Certainly a year ago. And so I think people have this assumption that they need to be going in, like truly transforming or replacing entire jobs. And what you're describing is much more tactical. It's like, find something just like that. And the fact that it's boring maybe actually is going to be important because that's not going to be a task that people will ask, oh, is this something that a human should be doing? It's like your example of like importing an Excel spreadsheet. Nobody wants to import an Excel spreadsheet by hand, obviously.
Yes.
And then this idea of like documenting learning is, I wish that more orgs were doing it because right now the challenge, for AI EDU is as we think about our own digital transformation and we go to look for examples, we can find orgs that have done it, right? But then you try to understand, okay, well, how did you get there? And it's like, well, it's actually kind of complicated. We had, you had someone on our C-suite that was like really pushing this, but then we also had, internal learning groups that sort of met. And there've been a few times where I think to myself, I wish they had just literally like documented all of this and now you can just plug it into an LLM, I guess, and probably ask some questions. But you described it as not just documentation for the sake of sharing externally, but also as a process for encouraging learning, which really makes sense. It's like even if you're automating things, you also want to be building expertise across the organization, being more tech forward. No, it's very validating, to be honest, to like hear. And I think it's important that you've been doing this work, before ChatGPT, because you have credibility. This is not just like some new thing that you're trying to pitch. Like this is proven.
Correct. And I was going to say that but the Impact Office, even when we started our mission anywhere, one of our key factors was, okay, if we really do believe in this, the way this is going to work out and how industry is going to use it, and we do believe in reskilling and upskilling, then how do we make sure that everybody can become part of that ecosystem? So there's, again, the strategy aspect of it. And so what we've done is we have something called Automation Anywhere University, and we put in all our impact funding into creating bite-sized learning that's free of cost, that can be taken by anybody, right? So it can be taken by a university, it can be taken by a social learning platform for refugees. It just doesn't matter. It's free of cost. It's there. It's bite-sized. You can take, play, do whatever you need with it. Then we also realized that, like most people, people have to have the chance to play with it. Otherwise, it's just like watching a YouTube video. It's not going to help you, after a while. You really need to play with it. So we have a free licensing model as well that people can use. And then we have instructor manuals and things like this. But our strategy was, let's take away the barriers to learning. And let's take away any barrier for anybody in the world to really become part of the tech ecosystem as much as possible by Automation Anywhere. And that has been, really successful for us, and very good results coming out of the academic institutions we work with, our own community of partners and customers, and also these impact learners that we have, right? So I think coming at it from that strategy has been important for us, and hopefully is helping make a difference in the community.
And you have 3 certifications, right? It's like Essentials, Advanced, and Master.
Correct.
Do you have to have a tech background or a computer science background?
Oh, I tell the stories I can tell you, Alex. These are the human stories that touch your heart. Like I said, we trained one lady who fled the Ministry of Education in Afghanistan, landed in Japan, had to suddenly, find job and keep her family floated in Japan, and learned our systems in 3 months as a working, talking, learning model now that she manages and does, and has a great job. We had one person, so we set up an RPA Center of Excellence, an AI Center of Excellence in the Mississippi Delta with another social partner, People Shores. And we've had use cases there where people were literally for 15 years flipping burgers at McDonald's because that was the only employer in a 200-mile radius, go from there to a 120K job because tech can be remote. And once you get trained, we've had single mothers. It's been a great one because if you have bite-sized learning, for example, I don't know a single mother who can take a year off work in order to train herself and also provide for the family at the same time. But bite-sized learning allows her to do that. And then She can land a job in 3 to 6 months. She was employed and didn't have to work nights and etc. etc. Better life for her and her family. But it lifts the entire community when something like that happens. So just fantastic use cases all around. We've had amazing stories of courage, of persistence, of wanting to really be trained in this. And they always surprise and inspire us so much.
I think that's really important. It's like, because only what, I think sub 4%, maybe even less, 2% of Americans actually work in, technology fields. And so a lot of the folks who are going to be, navigating career disruption, and that they're not tech people. But I think, these certifications, you mentioned like bite-sized learning, it feels like it's going to be more and more important as there's more disruption. Because like to your point, like there's going to be, we don't know what the jobs of the future are. Like the one thing we can bet on is there's going to be just transition of some kind, and people are going to have to be reinventing themselves to some degree or another. And not everybody necessarily, the single mother is a great example of, not everybody can just go back to college. That will be a solution for some. Yeah, Neeti, this has been really awesome. Is there anything else that that you would share, and especially with an eye towards, the folks who are listening in are, I think it's a mix of parents, it's educators, and it's also decision makers within sort of like the education apparatus that are, I think, feeling a bit overwhelmed by all of the, all of the change that's coming, and maybe looking for some, either a hopeful or at least a instructive message to kind of like help them figure out what to be focused on.
I think knowing that the industry is undergoing this transformation is an important understanding, and learning it is important, because then you understand that it's temporary or it's short term. In 3 to 5 years, again, the number of jobs that are expected to increase is 2 million more jobs, is I think what the jobs report said from World Economic Forum. And so things like this, it is a transition. So knowing that, I think, helps. Two is, I'm a big believer, and this may be a personal belief, but no education is wasted. Somehow, somewhere, it all comes together in how you perform, whether at a job or for innovation or as an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter. So I think learning is always a good thing, and there's so much of free learning available as well as paid learning, but there's just a lot of information available now, and so you really utilize that, take advantage of it, and be part of that ecosystem. And I'm a big believer that the especially with large language models and others, but we have to have more and more people engage with these new AI products and services, because if we don't, then the new innovation that comes out will cater to the few that were engaged, and that's really not what we want. We would really like for healthcare to, be for everyone, and pharma to consider, drugs for not just the male body, but the female body as well, etc. Right? There's just, the more we engage with these systems, the better the products and services that will come out of it for the next 50 years even. So being aware, and wherever you're comfortable, whether a little bit or a lot, I think is important.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Just get on the learning journey wherever you are.
Doesn't matter how far you want to go, but just get on it. And I don't know if it's relevant to this audience, but responsible AI. So one of the things that we do with the Impact Office is we run the Responsible AI Council within Automation Anywhere. And that's important, because I think there's so much new AI and so much new data and so many new products and services, and you have to have a framework of compliance, governance, and responsibility. And I think that's also good to learn. So if you're a student or a university or a training institute, it doesn't matter. Understanding and teaching the students about responsible AI governance is important. And understanding that is important. So that's something we take very much to heart, and we have a lot of programs around that internally for Automation Anywhere. But I think it's important for society at large.
Does it intersect with your, like when you do work, for example, with NGOs, do you help them kind of navigate some of these like responsible AI questions along with like the technology?
Some do. We are happy to share what we have done or what we do, but a lot of times the compliance and governance will be different. So we're not experts in the nonprofit field, of course, and things like this. But having that having that framework, understanding that, okay, this is how we look at data, this is how we look at privacy and cybersecurity and transparency and whatever else it may be. That allows them also to look at, okay, what should our policy be internally? How should we set this up? Um, I think having it at the top of mind is important because this is a new area. And we've learned with tech over the last 30 years that we didn't do very well with certain things, including social media for children, that we can do better with AI. So, take that learning and create those frameworks that enable us to be a little bit more protected as society is important.
Yeah, I mean, bringing it back to what you're saying about, having leadership and having sort of like internal champions that can, make it a priority. But yeah, like the responsible AI for, a health organization versus an education organization can be really different.
Yeah, we just completed ISO 42001, which is the responsible AI certification for ISO. And I think we're one of less than 100 companies, 75 companies
Wow.
in the world that has it. And that's why I think it's important, because I feel we have to deliver amazing things, but we have to deliver it very responsibly.
That's wild. Only 100. Excellent. Well, Neeti, thank you so much again.
Like, it was
Thanks for having me.
absolutely a pleasure, Alex. Thank you so much for having me.